All right, obviously that was President Trump just now, unscripted, taking questions from the whole world. The urgent manhunt still underway for Charlie Kirk's assassin. We could have an answer to who did it. We certainly have a photo. This is the photo we all been looking at all day. It was delayed to be released. It caught everybody by surprise. Why delay it? But the person of interest, you're looking at him. They are offering $100,000 for his capture. We cannot. Meanwhile, we continue to mourn the loss of a husband, of a dad, of two young children, and a generational talent, Charlie Kirk, powerful voice, who never shied away from respectful debate.
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put it on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their.
Yep, and here he is persuading college kids on campus. Just listen.
Let's think about this more deeply, because I could tell you're smart. Are you a voter?
I am a voter. I'm a registered voter.
I vote and you vote. So I'm talking to voters of this country that will determine the future of Western civilization. That's where we are on different planets. And that's okay. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I'm trying to be graceful in the way that we're going about this.
Pancakes or waffles?
Oh, pancakes all day.
No.
100%.
No.
Hello, Charlie. So
What's your name?
none of your business, unfortunately.
Nice to meet you. None of your business.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that's why some of those videos went viral, because it was unscripted, it was real, and it was a legitimate debate. People that didn't like him lined up to meet him. Harold, this is a page out of the Harold Ford playbook, I think. You like debating people that don't agree with you, and you don't get angry, and you listen. I mean, and this guy did it with a smile.
He did. Look, I'm still moved by all of this, like we all are, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come back and maybe before the show is up or before the night is up, we'll have more details about this guy, this killer. Each political base, it's interesting to me, Brian. Each political base, the Republican and Democrat, their extremes and the loudest in their party are always urging politicians and those representing them to fight. Democrats said, we want to fight. Even Republicans want to fight.
No one. Didn't Gavin Newsom just say that directly? It's time to punch them in the mouth.
All of them. I'm saying it goes on both sides. I mean, I watched Senator Mark Wayne Mullen and Josh Gottenheimer earlier today. Both acknowledge that both sides do this. The energy that we need, and what I hear from Charlie, and one of the reasons I didn't agree with him on very much, at least not a lot of things he expressed publicly. Where we did agree, and I think is indisputable, is that we love our country. And we just expressed it differently. And I love the fact that he was willing to have those kind of conversations with people. To your point, you were nice to say that about me. But you never hear the energy in the base of each of the parties urging politicians to solve. Everyone wants to fight. And I think one of the legacies and one of the things this young man will be remembered for is that he had a fervor and he had an energy, but he wanted that back and forth. Even if the back and forth got a little contentious, it was civil and oftentimes very serious. And that's what our political, not only discourse needs, that's what our political culture needs more of. Every time I listen to him, and I didn't agree with him very much, but he always seems like he was trying to get to an answer. And in politics today, I think one of the great failings and shortcomings of our political class on both sides is that everyone is just trying to settle a score. Everyone wants to say, I beat you on that point, not remembering or easily forgetting that we represent people and that they're real people who are going to be impacted by these things. And I hope that those who celebrate this young man's life over the next several days, and I know the country is going to celebrate him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, that is one of the things that is talked. That's what I heard from Katie and what I've heard from all around the table. That's this young man's legacy. And I hope Democrat, Republican alike are able to learn something from it.
Katie, the other thing is he was winning the argument. If you think about, and not until he passed away after the assassination did I fully realize it, because I was there early. They just said, this guy, Charlie Kirk, has got this group, and you want to speak in front of him? I thought, okay, I couldn't believe the size of the crowd and how young they were, and they told me about his movement. But I didn't see much movement in the electorate. It took a couple election cycles, right? But now he's got the majority. But he did it by not having big parties. He had better ideas, and he made it cool to want to be part of his posse.
And he gave everyone, but particularly his mission was to reach the younger generations an alternative, a better way to approach their own American dream. And he was effective. I mean, if you look at the numbers, just in terms of political issues, Democrats in 2023 had men 18 to 29 years old by 26 points. In 2025, Republicans had that same group by plus 18. So he was changing hearts and minds on policy issues by offering solutions. He talked about marriage. He talked about the American dream. He talked about the things you can do to better your life. And he was brilliant. He didn't go to college. He was constantly going to college campuses, not just debating, but teaching people so many detailed things about his Christian faith, about the economy, about world history. He would go to the UK and debate at the Oxford Union on very serious, deep topics. He was never superficial in any of his discussions with people who agreed with him or people who disagreed with him. And he tried to offer some clarity, mostly through his faith, to young people who felt like they had none, that they didn't have opportunity in this country. They didn't know right from wrong. And he's able to do that. And with his attitude towards all of this, and I find it just so admirable because so many people, including me, struggle with it, is he was so resolved in his mission and that everything would be okay. And he walked into the most violent in terms of the caustic nature of campuses around the country, and he walked into them willingly, and he taught, knowing he had a wife and a family and that the threats were there and having to have security. And he did it anyway because he believed it would be okay, and eventually his faith would protect him and it would pay off. And so it's paid off politically, and he's just touched so many people throughout his time, and obviously it was cut way too short.
Right, and with all this, Dana, out of all the tapes I've seen and the sparring sessions that I witnessed and the interactions, what I'm going to remember is that video that when the cameras went down and the show was over on his appearance on Fox and Friends on the weekend, when I think his 2-year-old daughter ran up to him.
I think she's 4. I think that.
4.
And he was a loving father, and he encouraged and inspired a lot of young men to want to be fathers. If you look at over the past 5 years, even how the numbers of young men who saying, "I want to be a dad, I want to be, I want to have a commitment, I want to go to church, I want to be a good man." A lot of that you can say, okay, wait. If you think about how many followers he had and how fervent they were, it's so interesting. Plus, he was doing something on college campuses that the professors are not doing. He was providing a forum for civil debate and in a fun way, and willing to take any question. That's not happening in the lecture halls. The other thing I was thinking about is I mostly saw him in interviews that he did on cable news, okay? Now, watching all these other videos, I'm starting to understand more how the younger generation saw him even more intimately, right? They're watching these videos on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever they were seeing them. And I think about how they had access to somebody like this in the medium of their time. We had Alex P. Keaton of Family Ties on NBC. I mean, and I was like, oh, that's a conservative guy.
Yeah.
And he was an outsider. And I was like, that's what it felt like when you were a younger conservative 25 years ago. And now it is pretty amazing to think that it is a cool thing to be. And I will maybe make this last point. Today was going to be heavy no matter what, because it's the anniversary of 9/11, the 24th anniversary. So on September 11th, 2001, we felt like we could all come together because there was an enemy that wanted to destroy our way of life, that hated the idea of freedom of Western civilization. And now you get to September 11th of 2025, and it's extra heavy and very chilling because you think the enemy might be within. And that's a choice. And I feel like America's at this very fragile state where we could go in either direction. I hope we go in the direction of more civil debate. But I find this to be a very scary time, and I hope that they catch this guy quickly and that we figure out a way to protect others who are out there bravely communicating.
I'll tell you, it sounded grim and very well said. It sounded really grim last night that we were going to catch this guy at all. I thought this was going to be like the Atlanta bombing. It takes years. But the fact that they found the gun, they found the casing, they know exactly what happened. There's evidently writing on the casing. They know he's got blue jeans, and they know he's got that shirt on and those glasses. So hopefully people said, I know that guy. Greg.
You mentioned civil debate. The word, you need two sides to be civil.
Yep.
And I agree with everything Harold said except both sides. And I'm going to tell you why. Okay. And I'll tell you why. You know, the Democrats, they didn't target politicians. They targeted people. You know, I will never forget Joe Biden in Philly in that dark, dark speech. You know, Tesla owners, they're not politicians. ICE agents aren't politicians. Trump supporters, demonized by the millions, they're not politicians. I mean, Trump went after individual celebrities and names, never went after the voter. I'm not saying that the Democrats killed Charlie Kirk. That would be crazy. I see them more like an absentee parent whose violent offspring did. You know, they knew that their parenting skills were bad because we told them about it on this show. We warned them. That's what drives me crazy, is we warned them about the rhetoric over and over again. Even after attempts on Trump, the Tesla vandals, which are the product of the media and the Democrats' direct language about Elon Musk, and they still didn't change their path. Right now, a lot of them, and I exclude Harold from this because Harold has always been sincere and legit from day one. Right now, Democrats are playing catch up. They're saying the right things. They're like the parents of a mass shooter expressing sympathy for the victims. But they knew. They bought him the guns. Now, I just want to, I didn't mean to say that. I want to talk about something that I notice about Charlie Kirk that personally means a lot to me, and that is his faith. You know, from his faith, something amazing comes from it that I never really understood. You know, people will say that he's fearless, but what if he wasn't fearless? What if he was doing all of this with a measure of fear? How brave is that? The fact that he's going out there with he's not fearless at all. And that, for me, is a lesson in fear and in self-doubt that, like, you know, as someone who used to take a drink before doing a live event in front of thousands, or cradling a glass of wine while doing book signings, or getting blasted before boarding a flight, you know, it was a lack of faith in my ability to handle fear. This would be I had to do this thing before I could handle something that scared me. He did something every day that might have scared him, and you couldn't tell. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I can't.
I know.
Greg,
I know.
But to say Democrats, the history of our nation, we regrettably, unfortunately, have a history of violence in American politics. And just as recently as early part of the year, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, had his house caught on fire.
Yeah, but you don't want to do the math.
The Minnesota
Harold, you're going to lose.
that was anti-Semitism.
No, but what I'm saying is, but to say Democrats, President Trump, who is a friend of mine, has said that Democrats are terrible.
He's talking about the leaders. Your party demonized the voter. And we can't, I mean,
I differ with you on this. But you and I, we're great pals, but I differ with you on this. And I think this is not the path we want to go down at this very moment. That's the only thing I caution everybody.
Screw you, Harold, in your face.
The only thing I would say, you know, the first one to make MAGA or try to make MAGA a negative word was Joe Biden. And it didn't work because then they used that word and they rode themselves right to the White House.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.